Well, spring has definitely sprung here in Finland. It's supposed to be breaking the 20 degrees barrier tomorrow for the first time this year. Anyway, I'm not here to talk about that. What I am here to talk about is the issue of discernment. Some everyday examples of discernment might be, well, there's blokes that I know who've ended up making terrible decisions about who they're going to live with or get married to on the basis of just entirely somebody's looks. For myself personally, I've acquired a degree of discernment over eating. What type of food that I'm eating, because I failed to discern that a lot of the healthy eating advice that I'd been given throughout my life was actually wrong. I couldn't suss out that the truth was actually the opposite of what I'd been told. But now I'm able to discern that, and I've been able to improve my health massively. So it's a topical issue, yeah, this discernment thing. I don't know if you saw yesterday, Keir Starmer was offering Brits the opportunity to get trialled up for a new mRNA, so-called cancer vaccine. So would you be in the market for one of them? Yeah, exactly. Discernment. Another example would be those things in the sky. Some of them are the trails of, and then some of them are just normal. So discernment's all about knowing the difference between truth and fiction, sussing out when somebody's trying to deceive you, discerning between sources of information that are reliable and other sources which are controlled opposition. We also live in an age of tons and tons of information. So the skill of selectivity is important, like filtering out the noise from really important bits of information that you need to react to. So if your discernment skills are not up to speed, you can end up making some very costly mistakes. So obviously over the last 4 or 5 years, many people have effectively drilled a hole through the hull of their own boat by choosing to take part in the experiment. They kind of took the knee to the coercion and gave in, or they did it willingly. They lacked that discernment to realize at the time that they were being tested. So if somebody tells you to drill a hole through the hull of your own boat, do you actually just do what you're told to do, or do you exercise some discernment? So the willingness slash ability to think independently and process information and come to your own judgments, and to practice discernment is hugely important. Some people call this critical thinking. But what I would say is that in my experience now, as a former teacher, I don't think you can teach people the skill of critical thinking. People are either born with that ability or inclination to use their brain in that way, or they're not. You can tell me what you think in the comments. So in essence, then what I'm saying is it's God. This stuff is God given. You either have been given this talent or you've not. And there's a section in the New Testament where Jesus basically explains this, that some people have eyes to see and ears to hear, and others don't. So this is from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 13. And it says, that same day, Jesus left the house and went to the lakeside, where he sat down to teach. The crowd that gathered round him was so large that he got into a boat and sat in it, while the crowd stood on the shore. He used parables to tell them many things. This is the words of Jesus Christ. Jesus says, or said, once there was a man who went out to sow corn. As he scattered the seed in the field, some of it fell along the path, and the birds came and ate it up. Some of it fell on rocky ground where there was little soil. The seed soon sprouted because the soil wasn't deep, but when the sun came up, it burnt the young plants, and because the roots had not grown deep enough, the plants soon dried up. Some of the seed fell amongst
the thorn bushes, which grew up and choked the plants. But some seeds fell in good soil, and the plants produced corn. Some produced 100 grains, others 60, and others 30. And Jesus concluded, "Listen, then, if you have ears." So it continues, verse 10. So then the disciples came to Jesus and asked him, "Why do you use parables when you talk to the people?" Jesus answered, "The knowledge about the secrets of the kingdom of heaven has been given to you, but not to them." So they've been given discernment. For the person who has something will be given more, so that he will have more than enough. But the person who has nothing will have taken away from him even the little he has. The reason I use parables in talking to them is that they look but do not see, and they listen but do not hear or understand. So they kind of lack discernment and comprehension. So the prophecy of Isaiah applies to them. This people will listen and listen, but not understand. So, yeah, this is particularly important given what else was prophesied in the book of Isaiah. More to come on that in a minute. So Jesus continues. This people will listen and listen, but not understand. They will look and look, but not see. Like they won't see the Messiah, because their minds are dull, and they have stopped up their ears, blocked their ears, and have closed their eyes. Otherwise, their eyes would see, their ears would hear, their minds would understand, and they would turn to me, says God, and I would heal them. So again, very controversially, many people who profess to be Christians, maybe this is some of them. Maybe this explains why many of these people enrolled for the medical experiment. They just lack this discernment. As for you, how fortunate you are. Your eyes see and your ears hear. You are able to discern. I assure you that many prophets and many of God's people wanted very much to see what you see, but they could not, and to hear what you hear, but they did not. So it's all about discernment, you see. Some people might lack the discernment to realise that the Bible is worth reading for themselves. Then you might have other people who do read it, but the words they don't really understand what it's about. Or maybe they focus too much on what Paul said and not enough on what Jesus said. So there's a difference between even people who do read the Bible and those that understand it deeply. They've been granted this gift of discernment. So just as in this parable, you might have some seed that lands in kind of thin soil, and the plant doesn't grow properly because maybe, extending the analogy to human beings is that they're too preoccupied by their egos and worldly possessions to actually discern and fully understand what's being communicated in the Bible, particularly by Jesus. In contrast, other people read, understand, and allow the Bible to transform their own lives. They choose to live a different way, eschewing material possessions, ego, status. And actually, the next bit, Jesus basically explains all of this. So Jesus says, "Listen then and learn what the parable of the sower means. Those who hear the message about the kingdom but do not understand it are like seeds that fell along the path. The evil one," that's the devil, "comes and snatches away what is sown in them. The seeds that fall on rocky ground stand for those who receive the message gladly as soon as they hear it, but it doesn't sink deep into them, and they don't last long. So when trouble or persecution comes because of the message, they give up at once. So again, you could, think about what happened with the medical experiment there. The seeds that fell among thorn bushes stand for those who hear the message, but the worries about this life and the love for riches choke the message, and they don't bear fruit. And the seeds sown in the good soil stand for those who hear the message and understand it. They bear fruit, some as much as 100, others 60, another 30.
We're also in the run-up to Easter, and I think, historically there's been great examples of situations where people have paid a heavy penalty for a lack of discernment. So all the way through the Old Testament, there's this scripture that points to the coming of Jesus Christ, when he actually arrived the first time. The best example of this is in the book of Isaiah, and I've actually done a video on that. So I think the title's something like Bible Prophecy That's Already Come True. So I'm sorry to state the obvious, but it needs to be stated because just lack of ignorance, lack of knowledge or whatever, is that the Old Testament was written by Jews. When Jesus was born, the Jews failed to spot him. And, much as today, there's two common threads. First of all, people didn't know their own religious texts, including the Jews at the time of Jesus, because they should have spotted that Jesus Christ was the Messiah that was prophesied in the Old Testament. There's just so many clues, it's just unbelievable. The only thing you can say is that they didn't know their own religious text as well as they should have done. And then the second element is also one that exists today, which is corruption. So the religious leaders of the day, the Pharisees and Sadducees, had completely corrupted Judaism. So at the end of the day, there was a huge lack of discernment, plus some dishonesty and deliberate deception thrown into the mix, which meant that the Jews missed Jesus's first coming, which was quite a big error. And I believe that a heavy price has been paid by the Jewish people for that error, that failure to discern. So there's some other interesting quotes from the Bible about discernment. So this is again in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 16, verse 1. Some Pharisees and Sadducees who came to Jesus wanted to trap him, so they asked him to perform a miracle for them to show that God approved of him. But Jesus answered, "When the sun is setting, you say, 'We're going to have fine weather because the sky is red.' And early in the morning you say, 'It's going to rain because the sky is red and dark.' You can predict the weather by looking at the sky, but you cannot interpret the signs concerning these times. How evil and godless are the people of this day." So in conclusion then, what I've said in this video is that first of all, discernment is incredibly important. Second thing is that it's a God-given gift. Some people get that gift, others don't. Whether you do get that gift of discernment or not, controversially, I believe it's all about living a good life. If you attempt to live a good life according to the teachings of Jesus Christ and the Ten Commandments, and you establish a personal connection with God, you communicate with God, God will grant you discernment. On the other hand, if you're a mini-me Satanist that's obsessed with ego, materialism, status, it's highly likely, I believe, that you won't be granted this gift of discernment. So you won't be granted the kind of gift of eyes to see and ears to hear. So if you don't live a good life, you'll be like the lost sheep that Jesus described. And as one of these lost sheep, you're not going to know what day of the week it is. How can you be capable of discernment if you're lost? And you're lost because you're living a lost life. You're making the wrong choices, you're looking for happiness in the wrong places. So that's all I want to say today. So God bless.